Okay, so today I'm going to be practically explaining the pseudo class Hoover. But before we continue, what are pseudo classes? Pseudo classes are CSS classes that are used to change the state of elements based on an action or based on an event. For example, there are different kinds of pseudo classes like active, like focus, and then Hoover is just one of the pseudo classes. So I'm going to open my folder here. I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to name it Hoover. I'm going to select the file in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to create a new file and call it hoover.html. I'm going to create a CSS file and call it hoover.css for the CSS part of this. So the first thing we need to do is to get the basic template of the HTML file. Alright, so now you can apply Hoover pseudo class on any element. So let's start with the button element. I'm going to create a button element and I'm going to give it a class, and this class is just the way of identifying it in CSS. I can use an ID or I can use a class, but I'm going to give it a class. And there are differences between ID and classes. Classes are used when you want to use it for more than one element, or you want to use it in more than one element or in more than one instances, but IDs are particular to one element. So I'm going to use a class and I'm going to name the class Hoover. Alright, so now let's put some text inside the button, like click me, and let's go to the CSS part of it. So the syntax for writing pseudo classes is very easy and it's the same for all of them, but there are two ways to go about it, and I'll show you later on. Alright, but let's just say Hoover and then Hoover. I know this might be a little bit confusing, but I'm going to explain it. I'm going to put background color purple. So before I run it in the browser, I'm going to explain this. This Hoover that you see here is the name of the class that I gave it. As you can see, it's also the name of the HTML file and the CSS file and the name of the folder too. Alright, I was supposed to spell it this way, but it was a mistake that I made, and I think the mistake helps because now you can see the difference between this and this. You understand? This is the pseudo class, this one here, and before we put any pseudo class we must add colon. This colon that you see here must always be there before a pseudo class, and then this is the pseudo class. The other pseudo classes like active, like focus, but this is one of them, Hoover. This is the one we are focusing on for this video. But this is a class, the CSS class that we are using to identify this element. You can see here, if I should take this out of here, it would not work even though it's here. So I'm identifying this element, this button element, using this class. So now let's run this in the browser. I'm going to open, I'm going to run it, and the pseudo class Hoover, okay, it's not working. So let's see why it's not working. Let me check everything is correct here. Okay, so we have not linked. Always remember, whenever you are using HTML and CSS in different files, you have to link it together. So we have not linked the HTML and CSS, so I'll just put the name of the CSS file here because the CSS file is in the same folder as my HTML file, and then I'll save it. Then I'll check if it works now. And you can see it turns pop when I hover around it. That's the point of the class Hoover. So I feel like I should still explain the class name, the pseudo class name, and the CSS class name. So I'm going to go back here, and as I hover around this name, you can see the element class Hoover. So this is used to point to the HTML element button. I think I've explained this before, but I'm just going to explain it again. Right, so this class here is used to identify this element button, right? So in order to know what we are styling, we have to put it here to know what we are styling exactly. And then this is the pseudo class, right? So as you can see, when I said I'm going to show you another way of doing this. So you can also take this, you can cut it and also put this here, right? And if I save it and then I reload it, it's still the same effect. So it's literally the same thing. So those are the two ways of doing it. You either put the CSS class first and then the pseudo class, or the pseudo class and then the CSS class. And now the next thing we need to do, as you can see, when the button changes to purple, the text is not that clear again. So what I want to do is I want to make the text white when I hover over the button. So I'm just going to change the text to white, and to change the text you just say color white, and that's it. I save it and you can see that the text is now white. So pseudo classes are very easy, and they are very interesting things you can do with it. So let me see, let me create a border around it too. I'm going to give the border solid 4px, and let's say the border is red. Let's see if this works. And we'll reload it, and you can see there's a border, a red border with a width of 4px around it, right? So that's how Hoover pseudo classes are created. So in a website, where you go on the website and you see when you hover around it, maybe for example the website was black and the text was white. When you hover around it, the text becomes black and the website and the button, let's say the button was black and the text was white. So when you hover around it, you see that the button becomes white and the text black. So that's how it's done in HTML, CSS, and in HTML and CSS. So before I end the video, I'm going to explain this particular CSS rule, right? So this is a shorthand rule, right? So it's actually 3 in 1. So this is the border style solid. I can decide to make it groove. You might not see the difference though, but let me see. You might not really see the difference, so let me use one that the difference will be clear. Let me use dotted, and then you see that the border is now having a different style. So that's what this stands for. This is border style. Now this is border width. If I decide to add 1 in front of the 4, you clearly see the difference. You can see that it's a lot bigger now. Understand? So, and this is border width, and then this is the border color. I don't need to explain it. So another way of writing this, let me comment this out. Another way of writing this is saying border width first. You can say anyone you want to say first, and then I'll just give it the same 4px, and then border style and style. Yeah, we can say, let me just give it the same dashed. Alright, let me just use that one. That one is a new one. Then I'll say border color, and then I'll give it red. I'm sorry, let's see, give it red. So this 3 CSS rule is the same thing as saying this one rule here. So let me just cut this out, and then I'll reload it. I see it has the same effect, nothing really changes. And then if I take this out too, and if I save it, okay, I save it, you can see it still does the same thing. So this is just a shorter way, it's like a shortcut to doing it. So this is like a shortcut to the other shortcuts you can use like this, but this is one of the shortcuts we use in CSS. So remember, whenever you are using the normal way where you have to say border style, border width and border color, the arrangement does not matter. But when you are using the shortcuts, you have to specify the border style first, followed by the border width and then the border color. So I think this is where we are going to stop for this video.